stage is set. A crowd gathers outside the Capitol complex on January 6th. According to many in the mainstream media, many on the January 6th committee, Trump gives the signal, doing nothing to prevent or stop the event, leading to them approaching the Capitol complex and eventually breaching. Of course, leading ultimately to the very January 6th commission we just discussed. What's their end goal? Well, that should be easy to see. They want Trump criminally indicted. Trump likely to be criminally charged in DOJ election probe along with other former White House officials. That's what AG Holder stated. This was just published 2 days ago. But what do they ultimately want? Many would argue that this is what they ultimately want. They want Trump out of the running once and for all. But the story suddenly changed. Something's now available. Someone involved that you would never expect, at least an association with him, that will entirely derail the entire process if allowed. It's why we titled this, Smoking Gun Evidence, Trump Finally Vindicated. Some would put a question mark next to that, and I see the reason for doing it. But now, a retired U.S. general associated with Pence, involved in these events, is demanding his testimony be released, and what it states upheaves the entire narrative. And that's what we're going to go through today. But before we get there, if you haven't subscribed to Lisa, take just a few seconds to do that. Help her share the video. Your comments, she always adores. If you haven't subscribed to my channel, please make sure you do. She'll leave a link just above it. If you haven't yet joined us at Restricted Republic, my only question is why? No commercials or interruptions, but more importantly, the information you can't get anywhere else, and that's why we created it. And for you to enjoy it today, a very special offer, RR News Now at monthly checkout. That's going to get you $1 a month for 3 months. Because we know once you're there, you'll go nowhere else for your news that matters. But now let's get back to this broadcast. Story in pictures, a story in tweets, a story in words about this man at the center of the entire saga, Donald Trump, and about a lady who hates him more than anyone else. As you know, Nancy Pelosi mocking him as the Orange Man so many times, even, well, in one of the more unique masks I've ever seen, but we got to take it a little bit further. She's put out many bulletins, this on January 8th of 2021, to her colleagues on the events of the past week, where she called him many names, an unhinged president wanting his nuclear codes taken away, removing the president from office, talking about the invocation of the 25th Amendment, but that story has been told. We know all about that. We know that she's received multiple letters. This one in particular is where the story will take focus because it involves this very letter, at least what it's associated to. Remember, the centrifuge of the entire commission is to show that Trump took no measures whatsoever to prevent the event. As a matter of fact, he incited it. That's what they want. They want to find the words that state that. They want to see somewhere in text. They want to see somewhere in a photo. They want to see somewhere in a recording. They want an admission of guilt. And that's what they're working towards. But don't forget about this letter. Did Sergeant of Arms Paul Irving get permission or instruction from your staff on January 4th prior to denying Chief Son's request for the National Guard? That's the centrifuge statement. Once again, that's why I show you this letter. Signed by Rodney Davis, Jim Jordan, James Comer, Devin Nunes, to name a few. Who is Paul Irving, Sergeant at Arms at the time of the event? This was back in 2012. Lawmakers unanimously voted this evening to install Paul Irving as the Chamber's chief law enforcement officer, the 37th to serve the post. He was put in by the Speaker of the House at the time, a Republican. Important to this story also. Was put in, nominated by the Speaker of the House. So let's move forward a step further. Just so you know, he's been involved with many things, Irving has, because you see him there at the bottom of your screen leading the pack, delivering the articles of impeachment. If you look at the top, Paul Irving, Cheryl Johnson, Gerald Nadler, Adam Schiff, Hakeem Jeffries, Sylvia Garcia, Val Demings, Zoe Lofgren, Jason Crow, all a portion of those that delivered that paperwork. A centerpiece around the entire saga, serving under Nancy Pelosi. And that's where this story, we got to cover both sides here. Some would state, Sources say conversations Pelosi had with Sergeant-at-Arms about National Guard presence factored into blender of decision-making that led up to the event. Irving testified himself. He first received a formal request from Sun to activate the National Guard after 2 p.m. on January 6th. Some would consider that too late. Events already transpiring, the crowd already gathered. But we're going to go further. He goes on to state no in testimony if he had to run the request up the chain of command. Irving replied no. These are all key statements. Just keep them in the back of your mind for a moment. The Sergeant-at-Arms is selected by the Speaker of the House and takes its direction from the Speaker. That is a contested statement, and I'll show you why and by whom. The Sergeant-at-Arms is one of the 3 officials that are voting members of the Capitol Police Board, the entity that oversees the United States Capitol Police. Former SAA Irving's sworn testimony at Tuesday's Senate hearing examined the January 6th riot on the U.S. Capitol raises additional questions on the exact timeline of events. The lost hours, how confusion and inaction at the Capitol delayed a troop deployment. This was on the New York Times, stating at 1:40, Mr. Irving finally approached Miss Pelosi's Chief of Staff, Terry McCullough, and other staff members in the Speaker's lobby behind the House chamber, the site where a Capitol Police officer would shoot a rioter later, almost an hour later. It was the first time Mr. Irving asked about permission to seek support from the National Guard, according to Drew Hamill. First time Irving asked about permission to seek support from the National Guard. Ms. McCullough immediately entered the room and passed a note to Ms. Pelosi with the request. Video from inside the chamber shows her approaching the Speaker at 1:43 p.m. Ms. Pelosi approved the request and asked whether Senator Mitch McConnell, the Kentucky Republican, who was then the majority leader, also needed to approve it. Ms. McCullough said he did, according to Ms. Pelosi's office. So now you have everything framed in. Many declaring that Nancy Pelosi was in charge of the Capitol. This fact check saying Nancy Pelosi wasn't in charge of Capitol Police on January 6th. No record of the request. A government memo about the events leading up to January 6th, statement from Pelosi's office in the Pentagon, and testimony from former House Sergeant-at-Arms shows Trump did not request 10,000 troops ahead of the rally. That Sergeant-at-Arms was Irving. But of course, the fact checkers got involved. Their rating is false. To claim that Pelosi was in charge of Capitol Police on January 6th is false based on our research. While the House Speaker has some ties to Capitol Police oversight, I showed you what those ties are, saying Pelosi is in charge of the agency isn't accurate. The agency is overseen by a 3-member board, none of whom are appointed by Pelosi. Additionally, the January 6th Select Committee will investigate more than Capitol Police, and there's no evidence Pelosi herself will be investigated. However, PolitiFact rates it mostly false. Only Nancy Pelosi is responsible for what happened at the Capitol, according to these news sources now. Capitol security is not solely the responsibility of House Speaker. It is provided by the Sergeant-at-Arms of the House and Senate and by the Capitol Police, Irving of which was nominated by the Speaker of the House. Yeah. The House Sergeant-at-Arms reports to the House Speaker or Pelosi at time of the attack. Capitol security is not solely the responsibility of the House Speaker. The House Sergeant-at-Arms reports to the House Speaker or Pelosi at the time of the event. I just want to make sure I read that correctly. Move forward. Trump repeats false claim that Pelosi rejected a request from the National Guard ahead of January 6th. Another fact check. This was heavily contested also. Donald Trump says he requested 10,000 National Guardsmen for his January 6th rally, but Nancy Pelosi rejected it, rating it completely false. There is no evidence that Trump made a request for 10,000 National Guard troops to be deployed for a rally he held preceding the event. There is no evidence that Pelosi denied such a request, leading to multiple events. We're going to get to this one in a second, but in the article, she eventually calls for the resignation of the chief of the Capitol Police, and I have received notice from the Sergeant-at-Arms, Mr. Irving, that he will be submitting his resignation. You normally turn in your resignation to either Human Resources or the person you report to. That's a normal company, though, of course. I'm not saying the government is a normal company. House Sergeant-at-Arms to resign. Pelosi calls for Capitol Police Chief to follow suit, and hence heads roll. Sund leaves. Stanger leaves. Irving gone. January 6th Commission formed. Statement Centrifuge. Focus before we get to what just came out.
You will hear that leaders on Capitol Hill begged the president for help, including Republican leader McCarthy, who was, quote, scared, and called multiple members of President Trump's family after he could not persuade the president himself. Not only did President Trump refuse to tell the mob to leave the Capitol, he placed no call to any element of the United States government to instruct that the Capitol be defended.
And we can stop it there. The centerpiece of the saga. Critical to have those actions, critical to have that statement accurate. Many in the mainstream media, again, reporting on this. Trump did not have 10,000 troops ready to deploy. Former House Sergeant at Arms, what was his testimony to the J6 panel? The intelligence was not that there would be a coordinated assault on the Capitol, nor was that contemplated in any of the interagency discussions that I attended in the days before the attack, that according to Irving. Sutton testified to the Senate panel that by 1:09 on the afternoon of the riot, he notified both Irving and Stanger of the department's need for a state of emergency declaration and National Guard troops, but it's not the day of the event that they should be focused on. It's often what is discussed. It would be what happened prior. Was there a National Guard presence called in or not? You saw the ratings prior. This would change the entire storyline, the sequence of events, and would determine who is this story about. Is the story about Pelosi or is the story about Trump? Now, of course, many have put aside information like this at President real Donald Trump's direction. This from Kayleigh McEnany. The National Guard is on the way, along with other federal protective services. Trump orders National Guard to U.S. Capitol after protesters stormed the building. You see, too little, too late. But it's what happened before that. And let's enter in Mike Pence now, as we round off this story. At least someone associated with Mike Pence. Vice President Mike Pence announces Lieutenant General Keith Kellogg as National Security Advisor. That Keith Kellogg looks slightly different now, so in case you see him in news or press, I want to make sure you know who we're speaking of here. We have allowed a culture of accepting mediocrity to fill the void where a culture of winning used to exist. Within our military, many seem to have fallen prey to the idea that holding someone accountable is the same thing as attacking them personally, which of course we know it's not. But then he starts to drop the bombshells, doesn't he? He's changed everything. General Kellogg, Trump did request National Guard troops on January 6th, asked Congress to release his testimony, even that title not completely accurate. And I'm going to show you why, and why it's so relevant. Kellogg, who served as Vice President Mike Pence's National Security Advisor at the time, establishing a timeline, establishing his position, showing he was there. He started with this tweet. Great op-ed. Reinforces my earlier comments on January 6th committee. Has quote from DOD IG report regarding January 3rd, 2021. January 3rd. Wait now, that would be prior to the sequence of events. That's not what we've heard. You start to speed up the truth that the January 6th committee will never uncover. They go into the article about Liz Cheney and Kissinger and Schiff, who failed job performances, helped pave the way to Congress. This is the op-ed he liked. 19% approval ratings want the American people to believe Mr. Trump did nothing to defuse the riot at the U.S. Capitol. Did nothing to defuse the riot at the U.S. Capitol. Now remember, they believe he gave the signal to allow for it. And what would go against that more than anything else? Well, this. To be clear, from retired General Keith Kellogg, on January 6th, page 199 of my book, in quotes, on January 3rd, the President asked the Defense Department to deploy National Guard troops into D.C. for J6 contingencies. Okay for J6 committee to publicly release my full sworn testimony. Release Army Guard and D.C. Mayor J6 testimonies as well. Would be illuminating. My friends, the evidence, the bombshell that everybody's been looking for is now right before your very eyes. Testimony exists, sworn testimony, but The question, of course, you're asking is, will that testimony be released? Well, it appears they're going to do everything in their power to assure it's not, because it destroys everything. It would vindicate Trump. It would end the saga. And you need it to be made aware of this side of the story that most won't report on. But of course, we need to bring it to you because you deserve to have it. And before we end here, Lisa wanted me to give a shout out to her sponsor. You've heard me do this before. Amazing company, NobleGoldInvestments.com, the leading gold and silver IRA company. Prepare for what's to come and protect your retirement with an IRA backed by gold, silver, and other precious metals. And now, as a special gift for every qualified account, you can get this 1/10 ounce gold coin. What an amazing gift. What an amazing company. Again, that's NobleGoldInvestments.com. Can't thank you enough for being here today. Until next time, Justice Knight filling in for Lisa Haven. Godspeed and God bless. Signing out.